There are places on this earth where nature does not apologize. Where every shadow hides a predator, every river conceals death, and every silence is merely the breath before the storm. Africa, a continent of staggering beauty and breathtaking violence, holds within its borders two of the most extraordinary, most dangerous, and most irreplaceable ecosystems our planet has ever produced. Tonight we go deep. We go into the dripping, ancient darkness of the Congo Basin, where the jungle breathes like a living creature and where survival is not guaranteed for any species, no matter how powerful. And then we cross to the sun-scorched golden plains of Kenya, where the drama of predator and prey plays out under an open sky with nowhere to hide and no mercy given. This is Africa at its most raw, its most real, and its most magnificent. Please let us know in the comments where you are watching this video and what time you are watching it. And be sure to subscribe to the channel for future videos. The Congo. Even the name carries weight. It rolls off the tongue with a kind of gravity, a heaviness that seems to acknowledge what the word represents, one of the most complex, most biodiverse, and most ferociously alive places on the surface of the earth. To stand at the edge of the Congo Basin and look inward is to understand, perhaps for the first time in your life, what it truly means to feel small. The trees rise to impossible heights, their canopies locking together overhead in a seamless vault of green that blocks out the sky entirely. The air is thick, heavy with moisture, fragrant with decomposition and growth happening simultaneously, life and death conducting their ancient, endless transaction in every square inch of soil. Sound travels differently here. The calls of birds, the crash of something large moving through undergrowth, the distant, resonant boom of a silverback gorilla's chest, these sounds seem to come from everywhere and nowhere at once, bouncing off trunks and dampened by the dense vegetation until direction becomes meaningless. The Congo Basin is the second largest tropical rainforest on the planet. Only the Amazon surpasses it in sheer scale, and even that comparison does little justice to what the Congo represents in terms of ecological complexity. Stretching across an area of approximately 3.5 million square kilometers, it sprawls across 6 nations: the Democratic Republic of Congo, the Republic of Congo, Cameroon, the Central African Republic, Gabon, and Equatorial Guinea, forming a vast, interconnected web of life that has been evolving, adapting, and diversifying for tens of millions of years. This is not simply a forest. It is an organism unto itself, a system of systems, a world within a world, and within that world, the rules are ancient and unforgiving. To understand what makes the Congo Basin so extraordinary, you must first understand the concept of deep time. The rainforests of the Congo have existed, in various forms, for somewhere in the range of 60 million years. Through ice ages and warming periods, through continental shifts and volcanic upheavals, through mass extinctions that wiped out entire kingdoms of life, the Congo forest endured. It adapted. It rebuilt itself around whatever pressures the changing planet threw at it. The result of all that time, all that pressure, all that relentless evolutionary experimentation, is a biological library of staggering depth. Scientists estimate that the Congo Basin is home to over 10,000 plant species, more than 1,000 bird species, and at least 700 species of fish. Mammals number in the hundreds, from the massive forest elephant to creatures so small and so secretive that new species are still being documented by researchers working in the forest's more remote corners. But it is not just the numbers that matter. It is the relationships. In the Congo, every species is connected to every other species through a web of dependency so intricate that pulling on any single thread risks unraveling the entire tapestry. A particular tree depends on a particular fruit bat for pollination. That fruit bat depends on a specific fig tree for food during the dry season. That fig tree depends on a particular species of wasp to reproduce. Remove any one of these actors from the stage and the cascade of consequences ripples outward in ways that are difficult to predict and nearly impossible to reverse. This is the fundamental truth of the Congo ecosystem, and it is what makes it both so magnificent and so fragile. The Congo River itself is the spine around which all of this life is organized. It is the second largest river in the world by volume of water discharged, and it is the deepest river anywhere on Earth, plunging to depths of over 220 meters in certain stretches. The river's immense power has, over millions of years, carved the landscape of the basin into a mosaic of habitats: flooded forests, swamp forests, gallery forests, and terra firma forests, each with its own particular community of species, its own ecological rules, its own predators and prey. The river is not just a geographic feature. It is a barrier, a highway, a food source, and a shaper of evolution. Species on one bank of the Congo differ from species on the other bank in ways that reflect millions of years of separation, driven by the river's width and ferocity. The Congo is, in every meaningful sense, the lifeblood of the basin. Now, into this world of green shadows and ancient rhythms, let us introduce the characters that make it so compelling, so dangerous, and so profoundly worth understanding. We begin with the predators, because in the Congo, it is the predators that reveal most clearly the nature of this place. Predators are, in a very real sense, the health monitors of an ecosystem. Their presence, their behavior, and their success or failure tell us everything about the balance of the system in which they operate. And in the Congo, the predators are extraordinary. The leopard, Panthera pardus, is perhaps the most perfectly adapted predator on the African continent, and the Congo Basin provides a showcase for just how remarkable this animal truly is. In the open savannas and semi-arid landscapes where many people think of leopards, the cat relies on speed, stealth, and a certain boldness. But in the Congo, the leopard's genius reveals a different dimension entirely. Here, in the dim green light beneath the canopy, where sight lines extend only a few meters before the vegetation swallows everything, the leopard has become something close to a ghost. Its spotted coat, those distinctive dark rosettes arranged against a background of tawny gold, functions in the dappled, shifting light of the forest floor as perfect camouflage. When a leopard lies motionless against the bole of a large tree, or drapes itself along a thick horizontal branch 20 feet above the ground, it can become essentially invisible to an untrained eye. Even experienced researchers with years of fieldwork in the Congo will tell you that leopards regularly move through areas without being detected, appearing briefly in camera trap images or leaving tracks in soft mud beside streams before vanishing again into the green. What separates the Congo leopard from its counterparts in more open environments is the sheer breadth of its dietary flexibility. In a forest where the prey base is both diverse and unpredictable in its distribution, a predator cannot afford to be a specialist. The Congo leopard hunts everything from small antelope like the blue duiker and the water chevrotain to larger animals like the bushbuck and the forest hog. It takes monkeys from the trees, ambushing them with a speed and agility that seems almost impossible for an animal of its size. It catches birds, rodents, and even fish when circumstances permit. This dietary flexibility is not simply a matter of opportunism, it reflects a deeply developed ability to read the forest, to understand the movement patterns and behavioral habits of dozens of different species, and to adjust hunting strategies accordingly. A leopard that hunts monkeys must think vertically, using the forest's three-dimensional structure to approach from above or from angles that monkey's primary predator awareness does not anticipate. A leopard hunting duiker on the forest floor must think about wind direction, about the placement of every footfall, about the precise moment when attention is diverted and the explosive burst of the final charge can be launched with maximum effect. The leopard's tree-climbing ability, well known even to casual observers of African wildlife, takes on new significance in the Congo context. In the savanna, leopards haul prey into trees primarily to protect kills from scavengers like hyenas and lions. In the Congo, where competition for carcasses operates under different rules, the tree is both dining room and bedroom. A Congo leopard may spend considerable portions of the day lying in the canopy, watching the forest floor below with those extraordinary pale eyes, processing information, cataloging movement, and waiting for the right opportunity with the kind of patience that human beings find both admirable and unsettling. There is something in the leopard's stillness that speaks to a profound confidence. This is an animal that knows it has time, that knows the forest will deliver something eventually, and that has learned over thousands of generations exactly how to make the most of every moment when that delivery arrives. To observe a leopard hunt in the Congo, a genuinely rare experience, given how secretive these animals are, is to witness one of the most precisely engineered events in nature. The approach begins from distances that seem absurdly far for an ambushed predator, the cat moving with a fluidity that seems incompatible with the dense vegetation it navigates. Each step is placed with deliberate care, the body staying low, the ears rotating independently to track every sound, the nose working continuously to parse the complex chemical landscape of the forest air. The cat may stop for minutes at a time, completely motionless, before resuming its approach with that liquid, boneless grace. When the moment comes, and it is a moment measured in fractions of a second, a single explosive contraction of those powerful hindquarters launching the cat forward, the violence is almost abstract in its efficiency. The prey is usually dead before it has fully registered what happened. And then the forest closes over the scene again, and the only evidence that anything occurred is perhaps a smear of blood on a leaf, a disturbed patch of soil, and the distant sound of something heavy being dragged through the undergrowth. But the leopard, formidable as it is, shares the Congo with predators of an entirely different character. Moving from the terrestrial to the aquatic, from the fluid grace of a cat to something older and far more primal, we arrive at the Nile crocodile, Crocodilus niloticus, and in doing so, we step back in time by approximately 200 million years. The Nile crocodile is one of the oldest surviving large predators on Earth. Its basic body plan, its fundamental hunting strategy, and its relationship to the water has remained largely unchanged since the Jurassic period. While the mammals that share its habitat have been undergoing constant evolutionary innovation and elaboration, the crocodile has essentially said, "We solved this problem a very long time ago, and we see no need to revisit the solution." The Nile crocodile can be found throughout the Congo Basin wherever there is sufficient water, in the main river itself, in the tributaries, in the oxbow lakes and flooded forest pools that appear and disappear with the seasons. Adults grow to extraordinary sizes, with large males reaching lengths of 5 meters or more and weighing over 700 kilograms. These dimensions translate to predatory capability that is almost beyond easy comprehension. A full-grown male Nile crocodile can kill and drag underwater an animal as large as a zebra or a Cape buffalo, using the famous death roll, a violent spinning motion executed while the jaws maintain their grip, to tear free portions of flesh or to disorient prey. The bite force of a large Nile crocodile has been measured at approximately 5,000 pounds per square inch, making it one of the most powerful bites in the animal kingdom. And yet, for all this power, the crocodile's genius lies not in brute force but in patience and concealment. In the Congo's murky, tannin-stained waters, a crocodile floating at the surface is nearly invisible. The eyes, positioned on top of the skull, can remain just barely above the waterline while the entire bulk of the animal is submerged. Those eyes, ancient, golden, slit-pupilled, process visual information in ways that are adapted to the aquatic interface, capable of detecting movement both above and below the waterline with remarkable precision. The crocodile may lie motionless at the water's edge for hours, its body temperature regulated by its position relative to sun and shade, its metabolism ticking over at the minimal rate that its cold-blooded physiology allows. To anything coming to the water's edge to drink, a forest buffalo, a bushbuck, a primate, the crocodile is simply part of the landscape, another log floating in the shallows, another irregularity in the muddy bank. The attack, when it comes, happens in a time scale that the human eye struggles to process. From motionless to full engagement takes a fraction of a second, the crocodile's powerful tail driving it forward with explosive force as the jaws swing open to their maximum gape. The goal is to seize whatever part of the prey presents itself, a leg, a muzzle, a trunk, and to use the momentum of the strike to drag the animal into deeper water before it can recover. Once in the water, the crocodile's advantages multiply enormously. An animal that might outrun, outfight, or outmaneuver a crocodile on land becomes desperately vulnerable in even a meter of water, where the reptile's natural element gives it complete authority. Drowning is the mechanism of death in most cases, and the crocodile will hold its prey beneath the surface with implacable, mechanical determination, sometimes for many minutes, until the struggles cease entirely. What is perhaps less appreciated about Nile crocodiles is their complex social behavior. These are not simple solitary killing machines. They communicate through vocalizations, body postures, and infrasound, low-frequency vibrations that travel through both air and water. Females are devoted mothers, guarding their nest sites aggressively through the long incubation period and then carrying their hatchlings gently in those enormous jaws to the water's edge when they emerge. Young crocodiles are protected by adults for a period after hatching, a level of parental investment unusual among reptiles and a testament to the sophistication that lies beneath the ancient exterior. Crocodiles also cooperate in feeding, positioning themselves across waterways to herd fish, or gathering at carcasses in groups where a complex hierarchy determines access and feeding order. The Congo's crocodiles are participants in the ecosystem in ways that go far beyond their role as apex predators. They are scavengers of carrion, regulators of fish populations, and their wallows create habitat features used by other species throughout the dry season. Moving deeper into the Congo's undergrowth, into the damp leaf litter and the tangle of roots and fallen logs that carpet the forest floor, we encounter a predator of a fundamentally different kind, one that operates on a timescale and in a manner that seems almost dreamlike in its slowness, yet is devastatingly effective. The African rock python, Python cebi, is the largest snake on the African continent, and in the Congo Basin, it reaches its full, formidable potential. Adult African rock pythons can exceed 5 meters in length, with particularly large individuals approaching 7 meters, and they are robustly built, with girths that can exceed that of a human thigh. They are constrictors, meaning they do not inject venom but rather rely on their muscular coils to kill prey through compression, preventing the prey from exhaling, gradually increasing the pressure with each breath the animal tries to take, until the cardiovascular system fails. The African rock python is an ambush predator of tremendous patience, a quality that seems somehow appropriate for an animal whose evolutionary line extends hundreds of millions of years into the past. A large python may lie in the same position for days, its patterned scales of brown, tan, and black creating camouflage that is extraordinarily effective against the textured background of leaf litter, bark, and shadow. The snake's sensory apparatus is exquisitely tuned to the task of detecting prey. Heat-sensitive pit organs located along the lip scales detect the infrared radiation emitted by warm-blooded animals, providing the snake with a thermal image of its environment that functions even in complete darkness. The forked tongue samples the air constantly, delivering chemical information to the Jacobson's organ in the roof of the mouth, a sophisticated chemoreceptive system that can track the scent trails of prey animals with remarkable precision. Together, these senses give the python a picture of its world that is utterly alien to human experience but perfectly suited to the demands of ambush predation in a complex, three-dimensional forest environment. A hunting python will select a site carefully, typically near a game trail, a water source, or any feature of the landscape that concentrates the movement of potential prey. It will then assume a position that maximizes its concealment and its strike range. The strike, when prey comes within range, is extraordinarily fast for an animal of such bulk, the head and anterior body section launching forward in a fraction of a second while the jaws, lined with numerous backward curved teeth designed to grip rather than cut, seize the prey. The coils follow immediately, wrapping around the body of the prey with practiced efficiency. The python then begins the slow, relentless process of constriction, adjusting its grip to maintain maximum pressure, feeling for the heartbeat of its prey and tightening slightly with each beat until the pulse stops. The prey of an African rock python in the Congo Basin reflects the full-size range that this impressive snake can manage. Juveniles begin with rodents, lizards, and birds. As they grow, they progress to larger quarry, small antelope like the duiker, young bush pigs, juvenile warthogs, and remarkably, small crocodilians. A very large adult python is capable of taking prey that stretches the imagination. There are verified accounts of African rock pythons killing and swallowing adult impala, young leopards, and even juvenile gorillas. The swallowing itself is a prolonged affair, with the python manipulating its extraordinary flexible skull. The jaws are connected by ligaments rather than being fused, allowing the mouth to open to a gate that far exceeds the snake's own head width, to work the prey item headfirst into the esophagus. A large meal may leave a visible bulge in the snake's body for days or even weeks, and digestion is a slow, energy-intensive process during which the python remains largely immobile. After feeding, the python engages in a period of thermoregulation critical to digestion, seeking basking spots where sunlight penetrates the canopy to raise its body temperature to the levels necessary for digestive enzymes to function efficiently. This is a moment of rare vulnerability for the python, its body sluggish, and its senses somewhat dulled by the demands of processing a large meal. It is during these periods that pythons sometimes fall prey to larger predators, including, in a satisfying illustration of the Congo's ecological complexity, the leopard that we have already discussed. But these moments of vulnerability are brief. The African rock python is itself extraordinarily difficult to kill, its scales providing significant physical protection, and its muscular body capable of mounting an effective defense against most potential threats. Now, shifting our perspective from the predators to another order of animal entirely, one that shares the Congo with these killers yet operates by entirely different rules, we find ourselves confronting the animals that perhaps most powerfully capture the human imagination when it comes to the Congo Basin. The primates of the Congo represent the most sophisticated community of non-human intelligence on the planet, and within that community, the mountain gorilla stands as a figure of almost mythological power. The mountain gorilla, Gorilla beringii, is the largest living primate, and the silverback male, the fully mature adult male with the distinctive saddle of silver hair on his back, is one of the most impressive animals in existence. A silverback can weigh 300 kilograms or more, stand nearly 2 meters tall when upright, and possess upper body strength that is estimated to be 6 to 10 times greater than that of a fit human male. Its arms, longer than its legs, are instruments of tremendous power, capable of bending steel bars, tearing apart trees, and delivering blows of extraordinary force. And yet, for all this physical power, the mountain gorilla is fundamentally a gentle animal, a herbivore that spends the majority of its waking hours feeding on vegetation, leaves, stems, roots, bark, and fruit when available, and the remainder in social interaction with the members of its family group. The social structure of mountain gorillas is built around the silverback, who is the undisputed center of gravity for the family group. Groups typically consist of one dominant silverback, sometimes one or two additional younger males called blackbacks, several adult females, and their offspring at various stages of development. The silverback makes all decisions for the group: where to travel, when to rest, how to respond to threats. He mediates conflicts between group members, protects females and young from outside males and other threats, and provides a continuity of social stability that gives each individual in the group a framework for survival. Female gorillas choose their silverback carefully, and the quality of his leadership, his experience, his ability to find food, his willingness to defend the group, directly affects the survival of their offspring. The mountain gorilla's day is organized around feeding, and this feeding behavior reveals a sophisticated understanding of the forest's resources. Gorilla groups are not random wanderers but rather follow complex, largely predictable routes through their home range, revisiting productive feeding sites at intervals that allow vegetation to recover between visits. They understand seasonal patterns of food availability, adjusting their movements to track the fruiting of particular trees or the growth of favored herbaceous vegetation after rain. Within the group, there is significant knowledge transfer. Younger animals learn which plants to eat, how to process them, and where to find them by watching older, more experienced group members, particularly the silverback and senior females. But it is the gorilla's emotional and social life that most powerfully resonates with human observers. Gorillas form strong, long-lasting bonds within their family groups. Mothers are devoted and attentive parents, carrying infants for the first several months of life and maintaining close physical contact for years. Youngsters play with rambunctious abandon, chasing each other, climbing, wrestling, tumbling, developing the physical skills and social sophistication they will need as adults. Even the massive silverback, that mountain of muscle and authority, will tolerate the play of infants with remarkable patience, sitting stoically while a young gorilla climbs over him, pulls at his ears, or attempts to engage him in games that seem comically incongruous with his sheer size. These moments of tenderness, these glimpses of a social and emotional life that parallels our own in unexpected ways, are what have made the mountain gorilla such a powerful symbol for conservation efforts throughout the world. The encounter between a human being and a wild silverback gorilla is one of the most extraordinary experiences that nature offers. The silverback, when he feels his group is threatened, does not immediately flee or attack. He performs, and that word is carefully chosen, a display of power and confidence that is simultaneously terrifying and awe-inspiring. Beginning with long, low hoots that gradually accelerate in tempo and volume, the silverback rises to his full height, beats his chest with cupped hands to produce that famous resonant drumming sound that carries for long distances through the forest, throws vegetation into the air, charges and then stops short, and then stands his ground, watching the source of the threat with an expression of concentrated, intelligent assessment. It is a display designed to give the threat an opportunity to back down without requiring the silverback to commit to physical violence that might injure himself or members of his group. For the researcher or field worker confronted with this display, the appropriate response is to drop the gaze, make oneself as small as possible, and avoid any action that could be interpreted as counteraggression. The silverback is giving you a choice, and the wisdom of taking that choice is self-evident. Sharing the Congo with the gorilla, and occupying a very different ecological niche, is one of the most visually spectacular primates on Earth, the mandrill, Mandrillus sphinx. If the gorilla is the Congo's embodiment of solemn power, the mandrill is its embodiment of vivid and probable color. The dominant male mandrill, and among mandrills, male dominance is extreme, is decorated with a face that seems to belong in the realm of fantasy rather than natural history. The muzzle is striped in brilliant blue and vivid red, the beard is yellow, and the rump bears patches of red, blue, and purple that signal reproductive status to females and social rank to other males. These colors are not mere adornment. They are advertisements, biological billboards broadcasting information about genetic quality, hormonal status, and social position to every mandrill within visual range. Mandrills are forest floor omnivores, and they live in groups that can be staggeringly large by primate standards. During certain seasons, when conditions favor large aggregations, mandrill groups called hordes can number into the hundreds, even approaching 1,000 individuals, the largest gatherings of any non-human primate. Moving through the forest like a mobile city, these massive hordes feed on an extraordinary range of items: fallen fruits, fungi, roots, tubers, insects, worms, small vertebrates including snakes and other reptiles, and essentially anything else that the forest's abundant floor yields to determined investigation. Each mandrill in the horde forages individually, but the group's collective presence provides safety in numbers. With dozens or hundreds of eyes, ears, and noses constantly monitoring the environment, the detection of approaching predators becomes highly reliable. The mandrill's social structure is built around female lineages. Females remain in their natal groups throughout their lives, forming stable, multi-generational networks of related females that provide a consistent social core. Males, by contrast, are more peripherally attached to these female groups, with dominant males gaining access to females during breeding season and then dispersing. The competition between males for reproductive access is intense and occasionally violent, and the physical differences between dominant and subordinate males, including differences in size, color intensity, and overall condition, are a direct expression of this competition. A dominant male mandrill is a genuinely impressive animal, weighing up to 35 kilograms and capable of delivering powerful bites with long canine teeth that exceed those of most predators of comparable body size. When threatened, a mandrill will bare these canines in a yawn-like gesture that is unmistakable in its meaning. Among all the primates of the Congo, however, there is perhaps none that forces us to examine our own nature more directly than the chimpanzee, Pan troglodytes. Chimpanzees are our closest living relatives, sharing approximately 98.5% of our DNA, and the more we learn about them, the more that slender 1.5% difference seems to represent not a fundamental distinction but a matter of degree, a quantitative rather than qualitative separation along a continuous spectrum of cognitive and social complexity. Chimpanzees use tools, plan for the future, engage in political maneuvering, form long-term alliances, go to war with neighboring communities, and demonstrate what can only honestly be described as culture, sets of learned behaviors that differ between communities and are transmitted not by genes but by social learning and observation. A chimpanzee community in the Congo occupies a home range that it defends against neighboring communities with remarkable ferocity. The boundaries of this range are patrolled regularly by adult males, who move together in silence through the forest, monitoring for signs of strangers with a level of coordinated purpose that is startling in its sophistication. When strangers are encountered, particularly when the patrol group has a significant numerical advantage, the encounter can escalate into brutal violence, with patrol members attacking lone individuals from neighboring communities with a coordinated ferocity that has been compared, uncomfortably but accurately, to raiding behavior in human societies. These attacks can be lethal, and research has documented patterns of intercommunity conflict that suggest deliberate, strategic expansion of territory over time. Within the community, the social dynamics are no less complex. Chimpanzee politics are intense, Machiavellian, and constantly shifting. Male chimpanzees compete for dominance through a combination of physical intimidation, coalition building, and strategic manipulation. The alpha male is not necessarily the largest or strongest individual in the community. He is the most politically adept, the one who has assembled the most reliable network of alliances among other males. These alliances are maintained through constant social investment, grooming sessions, food sharing, support in conflicts, and can shift suddenly when a new challenger offers a more attractive political arrangement to key supporters. The study of chimpanzee politics has provided genuine insights into the evolutionary roots of human political behavior, revealing that our tendency toward coalition building, strategic alliance, and social manipulation is not a unique human invention but an inheritance from a social world that predates the emergence of our species by millions of years. Chimpanzee tool use in the Congo takes forms both familiar and surprising. The use of stones as hammers and anvils to crack open hard-shelled nuts is perhaps the most famous example, and it requires a level of skill that takes young chimpanzees years to master, watching their mothers with intense attention, practicing endlessly with suboptimal results, gradually developing the precise striking angle, force, and nut positioning technique that separates a productive crack from a wasted effort. But chimpanzees in the Congo also use sticks modified for specific purposes: pointed sticks for extracting insects from holes, stripped stems for fishing termites from mounds, chewed leaf sponges for absorbing water from tree holes that the mouth cannot directly reach. Each of these tool behaviors represents a solution to a specific ecological challenge, a solution that was invented by some individual chimpanzee at some point in the past, and then spread through the community by social transmission. The hunting behavior of chimpanzees is perhaps the aspect of their ecology that most dramatically challenges comfortable notions about the human-animal boundary. Chimpanzee communities hunt prey, primarily red colobus monkeys, in organized, coordinated campaigns that involve multiple individuals playing different roles. Some chimpanzees act as drivers, chasing prey through the canopy and herding them toward waiting blockers. Others position themselves at escape routes. The most skilled hunters, typically senior adult males, position themselves at the most likely point of capture. The coordination involved, achieved through a combination of visual monitoring, vocalizations, and apparent understanding of each other's intentions, is a form of collaborative intelligence that sits squarely in territory that was once considered exclusively human. The aftermath of a successful hunt, the distribution of meat through the group, the social negotiations over who receives portions and in what quantities, provides yet another window into the sophisticated social calculus that governs chimpanzee life. As we draw our attention back from the individual species to the ecosystem as a whole, a crucial dimension of the Congo Basin's significance comes into sharp focus: its role in the global carbon cycle, and its immense importance as one of the world's most critical carbon sinks. The forests of the Congo Basin store an estimated 150 to 200 billion tons of carbon in their vegetation and soils. To put that number in context, it represents several years' worth of global carbon emissions at current rates. This carbon has been accumulating over thousands of years, locked in the wood of enormous trees, in the organic matter of forest soils that in some areas extend to depths of several meters, and in the living biomass of the extraordinary diversity of organisms that inhabit the system. The mechanism by which the Congo stores carbon is fundamentally the mechanism of photosynthesis, the conversion of atmospheric carbon dioxide into organic compounds using solar energy, operating at a scale and a rate that is difficult to fully comprehend. The Congo rainforest receives enormous quantities of rainfall, typically between 1.5 and 2 meters per year across most of the basin, distributed fairly evenly through the year, which drives photosynthesis at near maximum rates throughout most of the annual cycle. Trees grow, accumulate carbon in their trunks and branches, and when they die, much of that carbon is absorbed into the soil rather than immediately returning to the atmosphere. Over time, this process has resulted in the enormous carbon stocks that the Congo currently holds. But the Congo's role in the climate system extends beyond mere carbon storage. The forest also functions as a massive water recycling engine, intercepting rainfall, absorbing it through root systems that may extend dozens of meters deep, and then releasing it back into the atmosphere through transpiration, a process by which water evaporates from leaf surfaces. This transpired water feeds back into the regional weather system, generating rainfall that sustains not just the Congo forest itself but agricultural systems and freshwater supplies across a broad swath of Central and Eastern Africa. The Congo forest, in other words, makes its own rain, and that rain in turn makes the forest. It is a self-reinforcing cycle of extraordinary power, one that has maintained the forest's stability through millennia of fluctuating global climate. Understanding this carbon and water cycling function helps explain why the health of the Congo ecosystem is not merely a matter of preserving spectacular wildlife, although that alone would be more than sufficient justification. The Congo's forests are performing ecological services of global significance, regulating the climate in ways that affect rainfall patterns thousands of kilometers away, maintaining the planet's carbon budget in ways that affect every human being alive today and every generation to follow. The intricate web of life that we have been exploring, the leopards, the crocodiles, the pythons, the gorillas, the mandrills, the chimpanzees, is not separate from this carbon function but integral to it. The large herbivores maintain the structure of the vegetation. The predators regulate the herbivores. The decomposers process the organic matter that the predators and herbivores produce. Every species is a working part of the machine that keeps the carbon cycle functioning, and removing any of them has consequences that ultimately reach the atmosphere itself. The sounds of the Congo change with the light. At the first gray beginning of dawn, before the sun is visible even at the forest edge, the forest erupts with sound, a dawn chorus of extraordinary volume and complexity, the accumulated voices of thousands of species of birds, insects, and frogs that use the dawn period to communicate. Territorial calls, mating advertisements, contact calls between group members, the forest turns from the deep silence of the pre-dawn hours to a wall of sound in what seems like a matter of minutes. And into this sound, from somewhere in the distance, there comes a sound unlike any other, the deep, resonant chest beating of a silverback gorilla, marking his presence, declaring his health and vigor, warning rivals and reassuring his family. It is a sound that travels through the forest with remarkable clarity, a sound that somehow manages to communicate power and authority without aggression, to be both a declaration and a reassurance simultaneously. As the sun climbs and the temperature within the forest rises, though never to the extremes of more open environments, the canopy providing constant shade and the high humidity moderating temperature fluctuations, the forest's activity patterns shift. The birds retreat somewhat from the peaks of their dawn activity. The large primates move through their daily routines of foraging and socializing. In the dappled patches of sunlight that penetrate the canopy to reach the forest floor, butterflies of extraordinary beauty gather, some with wingspans larger than a human hand, colors ranging from electric blue to deep iridescent green, patterns that seem too elaborate to serve any practical purpose yet reflect millions of years of coevolutionary refinement with the flowers they pollinate and the predators they deceive. The Congo's floor is its own world, separate in many ways from the canopy world above. On the forest floor, among the roots and the fallen logs and the carpets of moss and fungi, live creatures that rarely see direct sunlight, and whose adaptations reflect a life lived in near-permanent shade. Forest duikers, small antelope of several species, ranging in size from the tiny royal antelope of only 3 kilograms to the more substantial yellow-backed duiker, pick their way through the undergrowth with delicate, precise steps, their compact bodies and lowered head profile adapted for movement through dense vegetation. These small antelope are primary prey for leopards, pythons, and various other predators, and their survival depends on a hair-trigger awareness of their environment. The sudden cessation of normal forest sounds is often their first warning that something is wrong, and their response is immediate flight into the densest available cover. Among the roots and in the leaf litter, other dramas unfold at a scale too small for casual observation, but no less intense for their miniatureness. Driver ants, Doralus species, move through the forest in columns containing millions of individuals, overwhelming anything in their path that cannot escape quickly enough. These ants are apex predators of the microworld, killing and consuming insects, small vertebrates, and any carrion they encounter. Other animals have developed complex relationships with driver ant columns. Certain birds, called ant-following birds, specialize in catching the insects flushed from their hiding places by the advancing column, feeding at the column's edges in a kind of parasitic relationship with the ant's hunting effort. The ants receive no benefit from this arrangement, and presumably would consume the birds if they could, but the birds are simply too large and too mobile for the ants to threaten, and so the relationship continues in the perpetual negotiation of ecological interaction. The Congo's rivers and swamps are worlds unto themselves. In the flooded forest zones, where the seasonal rise of the rivers inundates vast areas of normally terrestrial forests for months at a time, fish swim between the trees, feeding on fallen fruit, fungi growing from submerged wood, and invertebrates living in the leaf litter that now lies meters underwater. These flooded forest fish have extraordinary ecological relationships with the trees. Some species have evolved to time their breeding cycle to coincide with the flood season, dispersing their eggs into the flooded forest where the complex structure provides protection from larger predators. The seeds of certain trees are adapted to be swallowed by fish, passing through the digestive system intact to be deposited at new locations when the fish defecates, making fish the primary seed dispersers for entire plant communities. Remove the fish, through overfishing, through changes in flood regime, through pollution, and these tree species cease to reproduce, and the forest's composition begins to shift in ways that cascade through the entire system. In the permanent rivers and lakes of the basin, the ecological community is organized around the extraordinary fish diversity of the Congo, which contains approximately 750 species, more than the entire Atlantic coast of the Americas combined. This fish diversity is itself a product of the Congo River's unique geography, the rapid succession of different habitat types, the ancient isolation of the basin during periods when surrounding regions were more arid, and the river's depth and flow characteristics have all contributed to creating conditions where speciation could proceed at rates that have generated one of the world's most extraordinary freshwater fish faunas. These fish feed the Nile crocodiles, the river otters, the fish eagles, the kingfishers, and the millions of people living along the Congo River's extensive network, making the ecosystem's integrity a matter of human food security as well as ecological preservation. The forest buffalo, Cicerus caffernanus, is a creature worth pausing on, because it represents a fascinating case study in how the Congo environment has shaped its inhabitants. The forest buffalo is significantly smaller than its savanna relative, the Cape buffalo, reaching only about 60 to 70% of the savanna form's body weight. This reduction in size is a common adaptation among large mammals in dense forest environments, where movement through dense vegetation requires agility, where resources are distributed differently than on open grasslands, and where the thermal environment favors smaller body mass. The forest buffalo is reddish in color, darker than the savanna buffalo, another adaptation that provides better camouflage in the dim light of the forest. And while it lacks the massive, fused horn boss of the savanna buffalo, that remarkable structure that forms a solid helmet of bone across the forehead of old savanna bulls, the forest buffalo is by no means a pushover. Its horns are still powerful weapons, and its temperament, like that of all buffalo, tends toward aggression when it feels threatened. Forest buffalo move through the Congo in small herds, typically numbering between 10 and 30 individuals, much smaller than the vast herds of the savanna. They use established trail networks through the forest, following paths that have been maintained by generations of buffalo over very long periods of time, and they are creatures of habit, returning to the same wallowing sites, the same salt licks, the same feeding areas within their home range. These habits make them somewhat predictable to predators. The leopard knows the buffalo paths, and the python knows the wallowing sites, but the buffalo's social structure provides significant compensating protection. Alert individuals in the herd watch while others drink or feed, and the collective alarm of the group can be triggered by the detection of any member, providing a level of vigilance that no solitary animal can match. As we consider all of these organisms and their relationships, predator and prey, herbivore and plant, parasite and host, seed disperser and tree, a picture emerges of almost incomprehensible complexity. The Congo Basin is not simply a collection of interesting species occupying the same geographic space. It is a system, in the most rigorous sense of that word, a network of interactions and feedbacks and dependencies that has been refined over millions of years into something that functions with a precision and an efficiency that no human engineering has ever approached. Every organism in the system is both a receiver of services from other organisms and a provider of services to others. The leopard kills the duiker, but in doing so, it prevents the duiker population from overgrazing the undergrowth, maintaining the habitat that dozens of other species depend upon. The crocodile takes prey at the water's edge, but the carcasses it produces feed a community of scavengers and decomposers that recycle nutrients back into the system. The python lies motionless for days, consuming perhaps a dozen meals in a year, yet its presence shapes the behavior of every prey species in its vicinity, keeping them alert, mobile, and spread across the landscape in ways that serve the larger ecological function. The Congo Basin at night is a different country. As darkness falls with the near-equatorial abruptness that gives little twilight warning, the forest transitions to its nocturnal phase. The daytime sounds are replaced by different calls, the sawing, coughing roar of a leopard marking territory, the haunting tremolos of various owl species, the sustained chorus of frogs and insects that constitutes the night's dominant soundscape. New animals emerge, the pangolin, that extraordinary armored insectivore that rolls into an impenetrable ball when threatened, moves through the leaf litter with its remarkable elongated tongue investigating termite mounds. The pothos and bush babies, small primates with enormous reflective eyes, cling to branches in the lower canopy, their vision adapted to function in light levels that would be total darkness to most other animals. Various species of genets and civets move through the undergrowth, their striped and spotted coats blending into the pattern of moonlight and shadow. The night forest also reveals the true nocturnal nature of certain predators that are seen during the day but come into their full hunting efficiency after dark. The leopard, equipped with retinal adaptations that give it night vision approximately 6 times better than a human's, becomes an even more formidable hunter in darkness. The python's heat-sensing pit organs, which function independently of visible light, actually give it advantages in total darkness that it does not have in bright daylight, when the contrast between a warm prey body and a warm environment is reduced. The Nile crocodile continues to hunt in the river, its eyes equipped with the tapetum lucidum, the reflective layer that causes eyes to shine red-orange in a flashlight's beam, that dramatically amplifies available light. The Congo River at night carries a kind of electric charge, sometimes literally, as certain electric fish species native to the Congo use weak electrical fields for communication and navigation in the dark, murky water. The river's surface reflects whatever light is available, moonlight, starlight in the clearing above a bend, and in these reflections, there is a beauty that seems somehow incongruous with the danger the water represents. Yet this is the Congo's essential character. Danger and beauty are not opposites here but aspects of the same reality, the same evolutionary process, the same relentless pressure that has produced both the devastating efficiency of the crocodile's attack and the impossible, heartbreaking beauty of a mandrill's face. The Congo Basin experiences 2 rainy seasons in most parts of the forest, though the pattern varies with latitude and local topography. The transition between seasons is not the sharp, dramatic shift that occurs in more seasonal environments, but rather a gradual modulation of rainfall intensity and distribution that the forest's organisms track through cues that are subtler than a single dramatic change. Fruiting patterns in the canopy shift with the seasons, affecting the distribution and behavior of every fruit-eating species from the smallest birds to the largest great apes. The water levels of the rivers rise and fall, changing the distribution of fish, crocodiles, and water-dependent mammals. Even the leopard's hunting grounds shift subtly with the seasons, following the movements of prey species that adjust their own ranging patterns in response to food availability. It is in watching these seasonal rhythms that one begins to appreciate the deep time dimension of the Congo ecosystem, the sense that what we are observing is not a static picture but a dynamic process, one that has been playing out through cycles of wet and dry, of abundance and scarcity, of population growth and decline, for millions of years. The individual animals we have described are temporary players in a drama that transcends any individual lifetime, or even any individual species. Species come and go. The fossil record of the Congo and surrounding regions shows that the animal community of today is not the animal community of 5 million years ago, or 10 million, or 20 million. But the ecological processes that govern the relationships between predator and prey, herbivore and plant, parasite and host, remain constant in their principles even as the specific species that enact them change. The Congo is not a museum of a particular set of species. It is a living demonstration of ecological process, and its value lies as much in what it teaches us about how life works as in the specific organisms it currently contains. As our exploration of the Congo Basin deepens, it becomes impossible to avoid the subject of conservation, not as a departure from natural history, but as an integral part of understanding what the Congo is and what it represents. The Congo Basin faces challenges of extraordinary scale and complexity. Deforestation, driven by agricultural expansion, logging, charcoal production, and infrastructure development, is removing forests at rates that, while lower than in some other tropical regions, still represent an enormous and ongoing loss of habitat. Climate change is beginning to alter rainfall patterns and temperatures in ways that could fundamentally shift the conditions under which the Congo forest maintains itself. These pressures are real, they are ongoing, and they represent a genuine threat to the integrity of an ecosystem that took tens of millions of years to construct. The animals we have been discussing are not immune to these pressures. The mountain gorilla, whose population has shown remarkable signs of recovery in recent years as a result of intensive conservation effort, remains critically endangered, with total numbers still numbering only in the hundreds. The forest elephant, smaller than its savanna relative but equally important as an ecosystem engineer, has been devastated by poaching, with populations declining by more than 60% in the past decade. The leopard, while more resilient than some other large predators due to its adaptability and secretive nature, is losing habitat as the forest edge retreats. Even the Nile crocodile, that survivor from the age of dinosaurs, faces pressure from hunting for its skin and from reduction in the fish populations that sustain it. And yet the Congo is not a story of inevitable decline. The forest's sheer scale provides a buffer that smaller ecosystems lack. There are still vast areas of intact, functional Congo rainforest, areas where the full community of species goes about its evolutionary business in conditions that differ little from those of thousands of years ago. The mountain gorilla's recovery demonstrates that with sufficient commitment and resources, the trajectory of species decline can be reversed. The Congo's ecological complexity itself provides a kind of resilience. A forest with 10,000 plant species is more resistant to disruption than one with 100. Because when any single species is lost or reduced, there are other species with similar functional roles that can, to some extent, fill the gap. The forest has its own kind of memory, stored not in any individual brain, but in the patterns of species distribution, in the chemical signatures of decades-old game trails, in the root systems of trees that were saplings when this century's grandparents were born, in the genetic adaptations that encode millions of years of evolutionary experience. The Congo Basin remembers a world that was old before the first human ancestors stood upright, and it carries that memory in its living fabric with a fidelity that humbles and inspires in equal measure. Standing at the edge of the Congo River, watching the dark water flow past with its freight of leaves and branches and the occasional floating log that might or might not be a crocodile, one is struck by a feeling that is difficult to name precisely, something between reverence and urgency, between wonder and responsibility. This place is irreplaceable. Not metaphorically irreplaceable, not in the way we sometimes use that word loosely to describe things we simply like very much, but actually, literally, in every meaningful sense irreplaceable. The biodiversity of the Congo took tens of millions of years to assemble. The carbon stored in its soils and vegetation accumulated over thousands of years. The ecological relationships that make it function as a system were forged through processes we are only beginning to understand. Once lost, these things cannot be recovered on any timescale meaningful to human civilization. As darkness falls completely over the Congo Basin on this imagined day of observation, the forest settles into its nocturnal state with a gradual shifting of voices rather than a sudden silence. The last sunbirds and hornbills make their final calls from the canopy. The first owls begin. The insects, never entirely absent, ramp their chorus to its nighttime intensity. Somewhere in the darkness, a leopard begins to move, fluid, purposeful, perfect in its adaptation to this ancient world. In a nest site carefully chosen in a tangle of vegetation, a mother gorilla draws her infant close against the night's slight chill. Along the river, a crocodile slides silently into the water, its ancient instincts engaged, its extraordinary body beginning the slow patrol that has not changed in essential character since before the first dinosaur went extinct. The Congo breathes. It breathes in the carbon dioxide of the atmosphere and breathes out oxygen in quantities that help sustain life across the planet. It breathes in rainfall from the ocean and breathes it back out as transpired moisture that feeds more rain. It breathes in the energy of the sun and transforms it, through 10,000 species and 10 million interactions, into the living tissue of the most complex terrestrial ecosystem on Earth. And in that breathing, in that vast, ancient, ongoing exhalation of life, there is something that calls to us, not as spectators but as participants, not as observers from outside but as one species among many, sharing a planet whose health is indivisible, whose future is intertwined, whose fate we hold in common with the leopard on the branch, and the gorilla in the forest, and the crocodile in the river, and every one of the 10,000 species whose names we may never know. The Congo endures. For now it endures. And our journey through its green, dripping, glorious darkness has given us the tools to understand what it means that it does, and what it would mean if it did not. From this cathedral of evolution, from this ancient, living library of biological complexity, we carry forward a knowledge and a responsibility that are inseparable from one another, as inseparable as the life and death that conduct their endless, essential transaction in every square meter of this extraordinary, irreplaceable place. The journey through the Congo Basin has taken us deep into a world of shadow and complexity, of ancient rhythms and extraordinary lives. We have walked with leopards through the green twilight, watched crocodiles conduct their unchanged, ancient business in the dark waters, followed pythons on their patient vigil, and sat in contemplative silence near families of great apes whose social sophistication challenges every boundary we try to draw between human and non-human experience. We have glimpsed, in the mandrill's improbable face and the chimpanzee's political maneuvering and the gorilla's tender parenthood, the deep evolutionary continuity that connects all primate life, and we have understood, perhaps more fully than before, what it means to say that the Congo is not just a place but a living demonstration of what evolution can accomplish over vast expanses of time. But our journey through Africa's most significant ecosystems is only half complete. The Congo has shown us the power and mystery of enclosed, ancient, forest-bound life. Now we must lift our eyes, step out of the green shade, and let them adjust to a light of an entirely different character, a light so bright, so total, so uncompromising that it seems to flatten the world to a golden plain stretching to a horizon so distant, and so flat that the eye struggles to find anything to anchor on. We are leaving the Congo Basin and heading east. We are heading toward the savannah, toward the open skies and the dry, golden grasses, toward the Masai Mara and the Serengeti, toward a world where the drama of predator and prey plays out not in shadows and ambush but in plain sight, under the full blazing scrutiny of an African sun that holds nothing back and hides nothing from anyone. The Kenyan savannah awaits, with its lions and cheetahs and wildebeest and elephants, with its own ancient rhythms and its own extraordinary story of life and death and survival. And that story will unfold in all its breathtaking, sometimes brutal, always magnificent completeness as our journey continues. The transition from the Congo Basin to the East African savanna is not merely a change of scenery. It is a change of worlds, a movement from one set of ecological rules to an entirely different set, from one aesthetic of existence to another. Where the Congo is enclosed and vertical, the savanna is open and horizontal. Where the Congo operates in shade and moisture, the savanna operates in full sun and manages scarcity of water as one of its primary organizing principles. Where the Congo's wildlife reveals itself reluctantly, in glimpses through vegetation, in camera trap images, in tracks and calls and signs that require experienced interpretation, the savanna offers its wildlife in panoramic display, visible for kilometers in every direction, the drama of African wildlife unfolding at a scale and with a clarity that explains why the image of the African savanna has become, for much of the world, the definitive image of wild nature. The Masai Mara National Reserve in southwestern Kenya and its seamless extension, the Serengeti National Park in northern Tanzania, form together one of the most celebrated wildlife ecosystems on Earth, a system whose fame is entirely justified by the extraordinary spectacle of life it supports, and the ecological dramas it stages with regularity and scale that have no parallel anywhere on the planet. The Mara Serengeti ecosystem covers approximately 30,000 square kilometers, a vast mosaic of grassland, woodland, and riverine forest that supports the most diverse and abundant large mammal community remaining on Earth. The Mara River, cutting through the landscape in broad, muscular curves, provides the water that sustains this abundance through the dry season, and its banks and crossings are the sites of some of the most dramatic wildlife encounters the world has to offer. The savanna we are entering, the part of it centered on the Masai Mara, receives its rainfall in 2 seasons, the long rains from March to May and the short rains from October to December. Between these rainy seasons, the grass dries and the water retreats, and the landscape transforms from a lush, green expanse to a golden, tawny sea of dried grass through which the wildlife moves in patterns as predictable as the seasons themselves and as dramatic as any event in the natural world. The Great Migration, the seasonal movement of over 1.5 million wildebeest, accompanied by hundreds of thousands of zebra and gazelle, between the Serengeti and the Masai Mara, is the beating heart of this ecosystem, and everything from the predators that follow it to the grass that grows in its wake is organized around this annual cycle of movement. The African lion, Panthera leo, is the animal most powerfully associated with the savanna, and with good reason. Lions are the only truly social felid, living in family groups called prides that function as cooperative hunting and cub-rearing units, and the savanna's open terrain provides ideal conditions for the kind of coordinated, group-based hunting strategies that make lion prides so formidable. A Masai Mara lion pride might consist of 2 to 8 related females, their cubs at various ages, and 1 or more associated males who have formed a coalition to hold and defend the territory against rival males. The males of a lion pride present one of the most immediately impressive sights in the natural world. A fully mature male lion with a well-developed mane, that remarkable ruff of hair that extends from the face down the neck and chest, is an animal of such obvious physical authority that it is difficult to look away. The mane, which varies in color from tawny gold to deep black depending on genetics, age, and condition, serves multiple functions simultaneously. It signals social and physical status to rivals and potential mates, protecting the neck during fights with other males. It is a biological advertisement of health and genetic quality, with darker, fuller manes generally corresponding to higher testosterone levels and better overall condition. But the mane also comes with costs. It is a heat trap in the savanna's punishing sun, and lions with very heavy manes tend to rest in shade more frequently and hunt less actively than their maneless female companions. The Masai Mara's lions live in a landscape of extraordinary richness, surrounded by prey populations that, during the migration season, literally exceed the capacity of the predator community to consume. Yet the lion's relationship to this abundance is not simply one of easy exploitation. The dynamics of predator-prey interaction are complex and shifting, governed by the relative speeds, strengths, and intelligences of all parties involved. The dynamics of predator and prey on the Kenyan savanna are governed by rules that have been refined over millions of years of coevolutionary pressure, and nowhere are those rules more dramatically on display than in the relationship between the African lion and the great herds that share its landscape. The lion's hunting success rate varies considerably depending on conditions, terrain, time of day, group size, prey species, and the individual experience of the hunters involved, but averaged across all hunts attempted, lions succeed somewhere between 20 and 30% of the time. This relatively modest success rate means that even in a landscape teeming with prey, lions must hunt frequently and must coordinate their efforts carefully to ensure that the pride maintains sufficient caloric intake to sustain all its members, including the cubs whose survival represents the future of the genetic line. The lionesses are the primary hunters of the pride, and their hunting strategies in the Masai Mara reveal a level of tactical sophistication that continues to impress and, in certain respects, surprise researchers who have dedicated careers to studying these animals. A typical coordinated hunt begins with a period of careful observation, lionesses watching a herd of wildebeest or zebra from a position of concealment, reading the herd's behavior with experienced eyes, identifying individuals that show any sign of weakness, injury, or diminished alertness. Younger animals, heavily pregnant females, and individuals showing any gait abnormality are noted and tracked. The lionesses read the wind constantly, positioning themselves downwind of the target herd to prevent their scent from triggering premature flight. When the decision to hunt is made, the pride spreads out into a loose formation that reflects roles established through long experience. Some individuals move to positions that will cut off escape routes. Others, the drivers, position themselves to push the herd toward the waiting ambushers. The precision with which experienced lionesses execute these movements, communicating intent through subtle postural signals, ear positions, and tail movements rather than vocalizations that would alert prey, suggests a level of coordinated planning that requires each individual to hold a model of what the other participants are doing and intend to do. This is a cognitively demanding feat, one that reflects the sophisticated social intelligence that lion prides have developed over evolutionary time. The charge, when it comes, is an explosive event that resolves the long minutes of careful approach in a matter of seconds. The target animal, separated from the herd or caught at a disadvantage, is chased down with a combination of speed and coordination, the leading lioness making the initial contact, typically a swipe at the hindquarters to destabilize the prey's balance, while others converge to add their weight to the takedown. The kill is made by suffocation, the lioness clamping her jaws over the prey animal's muzzle or throat and maintaining the grip until the animal stops breathing. It is a prolonged process, sometimes lasting several minutes for large prey, and requires substantial sustained effort from an animal that may have already spent considerable energy in the chase. The aftermath of a successful kill is a social drama in miniature. The adult males, who may have played little or no role in the hunt, arrive to claim priority access to the carcass, their greater size and aggression asserting dominance over the lionesses whose skill produced the meal. The females feed when opportunity allows, snarling and jockeying for position around the carcass in a way that seems surprisingly egalitarian given that the male's priority has just been established. Cubs are fed last, often subsisting on scraps, and during periods of prey scarcity. This feeding hierarchy can have fatal consequences for the youngest and smallest members of the pride. The management of cubs is one of the most revealing aspects of lion's social life, demonstrating both the benefits of cooperative group living and the ruthless edge that runs through even the most apparently cohesive social system. Lionesses within a pride tend to give birth within a few weeks of each other, a synchronization that allows the cubs to be raised communally, with all lactating females nursing any cub that approaches regardless of maternity. This communal cub rearing is a significant advantage, providing cubs with multiple sources of nutrition and care even if their biological mother is temporarily absent or injured. But the arrival of new male lions, when a coalition of males ousts the previous pride males and takes over the territory, brings immediate danger to all cubs sired by the previous males. Incoming males will kill cubs that are not their own, a behavior that seems shocking in its brutality but which makes cold evolutionary sense. By eliminating cubs that carry a rival's genes, The new males bring the females quickly back into reproductive condition and ensure that the next generation of cubs carries their own genetic contribution. The male coalition itself is a remarkable social structure. Lions are unusual among big cats in that males regularly form lasting partnerships with other males, typically brothers or cousins from the same natal pride, and these partnerships are maintained through years of shared experience and mutual support. A coalition of 2 or 3 males working together can hold a territory and a pride against rivals that no single male could resist alone. Coalition males coordinate their roaring to project the impression of a larger group, roar together in displays of territorial assertion that carry for 8 kilometers across the open savanna, and fight together when challenged. The bonds between coalition males involve genuine social affiliation, resting in contact, grooming each other, greeting with head rubbing and cheek pressing, and appear to involve a degree of genuine social attachment that goes beyond simple tactical partnership. The lion's roar is one of the most evocative sounds in the natural world, and in the context of the Masai Mara, it takes on layers of meaning that repay careful attention. A full roaring sequence begins with deep, moaning notes that seem to vibrate the ground, building through a series of full roars to a sustained peak before dying away in a series of softer, coughing exhalations. The full sequence can last for 30 seconds or more and can be heard at distances that seem impossible, 8, even 10 kilometers on a still night when the air is cold and dense. The roar is simultaneously a territorial declaration to rival males, a location call to scattered pride members, and a signal of the roaring individual's physical condition and competitive ability. Roars are answered by other lions throughout the area, creating a rolling, territorial conversation that maps the distribution of social groups across the landscape as clearly as any GPS system. But the savanna is not a world that belongs to lions alone, and to understand it fully, we must turn our attention to an animal that offers a very different model of predatory excellence, one that has sacrificed raw power and social coordination for something even more extraordinary: pure, concentrated, aerodynamic speed. The cheetah, Acinonyx jubatus, is the fastest land animal on Earth, capable of accelerating from stationary to 100 km per hour in approximately 3 seconds and sustaining top speeds of over 112 km per hour in bursts of 300 to 500 meters. These numbers are astonishing, but they only begin to describe what makes the cheetah such a remarkable evolutionary achievement. The cheetah's body is, from the ground up, a masterpiece of speed engineering. Unlike the lion or the leopard, which are built for power and can be described as muscular and heavy relative to their length, the cheetah is built for velocity, with a deep chest that houses enormous lungs and a heart proportionally larger than that of any other big cat, a flexible, almost cat-like spine that acts as a spring mechanism during the gallop, long legs with semi-retractable claws that function like running spikes to grip the ground, and a long tail that serves as a dynamic stabilizer during the rapid direction changes of a chase. Even the cheetah's head is adapted for the hunt. The eyes, with their high placement and the distinctive black, tear marks, running from the inner corner of each eye down to the mouth, are positioned and structured to function as a precision optical system for tracking fast-moving prey at long distances in bright, glare-filled savanna conditions. Watching a cheetah hunt in the Masai Mara is one of the most kinetically thrilling experiences the natural world provides. The hunt begins with a lengthy observation phase that can itself last an hour or more. The cheetah, often sitting upright on a termite mound or fallen log that provides a raised vantage point, scans the surrounding grassland with those remarkable eyes, processing movement at ranges that exceed what the human eye can resolve without optical assistance. When a suitable target is identified, typically a gazelle, the impala, or a young wildebeest, with clear preference for animals that show any sign of reduced speed or alertness, the cheetah descends from its vantage point and begins the stalk. The stalking phase is executed with a stealth that seems surprising in an animal so obviously built for open country running, yet reveals the cheetah's intelligence and the sophistication of its hunting protocol. The cheetah uses every available piece of cover, a termite mound, a bush, a slight depression in the grassland, to reduce its profile as it approaches the target animal. The approach is slow, deliberate, and patient, sometimes covering hundreds of meters over 20 minutes or more, the cheetah freezing completely when the target raises its head to scan for danger. The goal is to reduce the distance between hunter and prey to a point where the cheetah's acceleration can overcome the prey animal's head start. Typically, this means approaching to within 70 to 100 meters before the final charge is initiated. The charge is overwhelming in its visual impact. From the first stride to full speed takes only a few seconds, and the movement of the cheetah at full gallop, the spine extending and compressing rhythmically, all 4 feet leaving the ground twice in each stride cycle, the tail sweeping from side to side as a counterbalance, is simultaneously one of the most beautiful and one of the most terrifying things in nature. The prey animal has usually detected the charge by this point, and is running at its own top speed, and the outcome of the next few seconds is determined by the precise interplay of the cheetah's acceleration and stamina against the prey's speed and agility. The cheetah's trip strike, a specialized technique in which a front paw swipes at the prey's leg or flank to knock it off balance, brings the chase to its conclusion, the prey tumbling at high speed and the cheetah instantly clamping its jaws on the throat to begin the suffocation process. What happens after the kill reveals one of the cheetah's most significant ecological vulnerabilities. The physical effort of a full-speed chase leaves the cheetah severely oxygen depleted, with its heart rate and respiratory rate at maximum levels. It must spend 10 to 20 minutes recovering, panting, monitoring the surrounding area with anxious eyes, before it can even begin to feed. During this recovery period, the cheetah is at its most vulnerable, exhausted, with a carcass that announces its location to every scavenger within sight range. Lions, hyenas, wild dogs, and even large vulture congregations will displace a cheetah from its kill with depressing regularity, and studies have shown that cheetahs in the Masai Mara lose a significant proportion of their kills to kleptoparasitism, theft by larger predators or more aggressive scavengers. This constant competition for its kills, combined with the cheetah's physical limitations as a fighter, its lightweight frame and partially retractable claws are optimized for speed rather than combat, and a cheetah that sustains significant injury in a fight may lose the hunting ability on which its survival depends, means that the cheetah operates in a state of permanent caloric pressure. Unlike lions, which can gorge on a large kill and then rest for several days, cheetahs must hunt frequently, successfully, and in a landscape where every successful hunt is immediately contested. Female cheetahs raising cubs face particularly acute pressure, needing to provide for multiple dependent offspring while managing the same competitive landscape. The mortality rate of cheetah cubs in areas with high lion and hyena densities can exceed 90% in the first year of life, a statistic that speaks volumes about the difficulty of the cheetah's ecological position. In response to these pressures, male cheetahs have evolved a social strategy that echoes, in some respects, the male coalition strategy of lions. Male siblings frequently remain together after separating from their mother, forming coalitions of 2 or 3 that hunt cooperatively and defend territories together. Coalition males can take larger prey than solitary males, and their combined vigilance provides better protection against displacement from kills. Unlike lion coalitions, which can include unrelated males, cheetah coalitions are almost always formed by brothers, a reflection of the kin selection pressures that make cooperation between close relatives evolutionarily logical. The spotted hyena, Crocodile, is one of the most misunderstood and underestimated animals on the African savanna, and correcting this misunderstanding is one of the most important services that honest natural history can perform. The hyena's reputation as a cowardly scavenger, as the villain of the savanna, as an animal of low ecological status existing primarily to clean up after the nobler predators, is almost entirely wrong, and the reality of what hyenas are and how they function in the Masai Mara ecosystem is far more interesting than the stereotype. Spotted hyenas are highly successful apex predators in their own right, killing the majority of the prey they consume through active hunting rather than scavenging. Hyena clans, which can number between 40 and 80 individuals in productive areas like the Masai Mara, are built around a strict female-dominated hierarchy. Hyena society is one of the very few mammalian societies in which females consistently dominate all males. Female spotted hyenas are larger than males, physiologically masculinized by high androgen levels during fetal development, a process that produces the famous pseudopenis in females, which makes visual sex determination genuinely difficult and more aggressive than their male counterparts. The alpha female of a hyena clan, and the female dominance hierarchy below her, determines access to food, denning sites, and all other critical resources. Males occupy the lowest positions in the social hierarchy and must constantly navigate a social world controlled by females to meet their basic needs. Spotted hyena hunts are executed with a stamina-based strategy fundamentally different from the speed approach of the cheetah or the ambush coordination of the lion. Hyenas are coursing predators. They select a target, typically a wildebeest or zebra, and pursue it in a sustained chase that can cover several kilometers at speeds of around 50 to 60 kilometers per hour. The hyena's disproportionately large heart and lungs, its powerful body built low to the ground with the characteristic sloping topline, and its bone-crushing jaw musculature are all adaptations to a hunting strategy that trades the cheetah's explosive speed for the ability to sustain a chase far longer than most prey animals can maintain maximum effort. As the pursuit continues, the prey tires, and the hyena, whose aerobic capacity is remarkable for a mammal of its size, maintains its pace until the gap closes. The killing bite of a spotted hyena is delivered to the prey's flanks, hindquarters, or abdomen, a less precise approach than the suffocation technique of the big cats, and one that results in prey animals sometimes still being alive when the dismembering of the carcass begins. This aspect of hyena feeding behavior has contributed significantly to their negative reputation, as it presents as crude brutality to human observers who naturally prefer the apparent cleanness of a cat kill. But from an ecological perspective, the method is entirely functional, and the hyena's extraordinary jaw anatomy, capable of generating bite forces of approximately 1,000 pounds per square inch, with teeth and jaw muscles designed to crack bones that no other predator can process, means that hyenas extract nutritional value from carcasses that other predators must leave behind, recycling minerals from bone back into the ecosystem with a thoroughness that makes them indispensable. Nutrient recyclers. The hyena's vocal repertoire is one of the most complex and communicatively rich of any carnivore. The famous laugh, properly called a giggle, is not an expression of amusement but rather a submissive vocalization produced in situations of social excitement or subordination. The whooping call, that rising, haunting sound that carries across the savanna on still nights, is a long-distance contact call, used by clan members to coordinate their movements across a large territory. The whoop encodes information about the calling individual's identity and social status, and clan members can recognize individual whoopers from their acoustic signature. The full repertoire includes growls, grunts, groans, and various subtle vocalizations whose meanings researchers are still working to decode, evidence of a communicative sophistication that reflects the demands of managing social relationships in a large, hierarchically complex group. The hyena's relationship with lions is one of the most dynamic and ecologically significant interspecific relationships on the savanna. Lions and hyenas compete directly for food resources, and the interaction between their communities shapes the behavior of both species in profound ways. Lions regularly steal kills from hyenas, using their greater individual size and strength to displace even large hyena groups if the lion coalition or pride group is sufficiently large. But hyenas, in sufficient numbers, can reverse this relationship. A clan of 30 hyenas can drive a single male lion or a small pride off a carcass through the sheer persistence of their pressure. The outcome of any particular interaction depends on the specific numbers, motivations, and individual personalities involved, making each encounter a fresh calculation of competitive advantage. What is less often recognized is that lions kill hyenas with considerable regularity, not out of hunger. Lions rarely eat hyenas, but apparently as competitive suppression. A lion encountering a hyena will frequently attack it with lethal intent, driving it from the area. This targeted killing of competitors has been documented extensively in the Masai Mara and appears to represent a deliberate strategy on the lion's part to reduce competition for the prey base. Hyenas, for their part, are not passive victims. They will mob and harass lions when clan size and circumstances favor it, and the constant friction between these two great predator communities is one of the defining ecological dynamics of the savanna. Now, shifting our attention from the predators to the prey, we arrive at the animals that are, in terms of sheer ecological impact, perhaps the most important organisms on the Kenyan savanna. The blue wildebeest, Conachutes taurinus, is not, at first glance, an animal that inspires the same immediate aesthetic response as a lion or a cheetah. It is, frankly, a somewhat ungainly creature, with a heavy front end and lighter hindquarters, a large humped head that seems disproportionate to its body, and a habit of standing in groups with an expression of bovine bewilderment that has inspired descriptions less charitable than it deserves. But the wildebeest is the keystone species of the Masai Mara Serengeti ecosystem, the animal around which virtually all other ecological relationships are organized, and its aggregate behavior produces one of the most spectacular natural events on the planet. The great wildebeest migration is driven by one of the most powerful forces in nature, the need to find grass. The Serengeti Mara ecosystem is organized around a rainfall gradient that causes different parts of the ecosystem to green up at different times of year. The short grass plains of the southern Serengeti receive their rains from November to May, and the nutritious, phosphorus-rich grasses that grow there are ideal for the calving season. Wildebeest are born in an extraordinary synchronous burst in February and March, with up to 500,000 calves arriving within a period of 2 to 3 weeks. A phenomenon that overwhelms predator capacity and ensures the survival of enough calves to sustain the population. Then, as the southern plains dry out, the wildebeest begin their clockwise migration northward, following the rains and the green flush of grass, through the western corridor of the Serengeti, eventually arriving at the Masai Mara by July and August, precisely when the Mara's long rains have produced the lush, tall grass that sustains the massive herds through the dry season. The movement of 1.5 million wildebeest across the savanna is an experience that defies easy description. The sound alone, the combined lowing, bellowing, and thundering hooves of hundreds of thousands of animals, creates a wall of noise that can be heard and felt from kilometers away. The dust raised by so many hooves hangs over the moving columns in a permanent golden haze that catches the light and can be seen from extraordinary distances. The savanna itself seems to transform around the moving herds. The grass, cropped short by the millions of grazing animals, gives way behind them to a carpet of dung that fertilizes the soil for the next growing season, while ahead of them the tall, unraised grass represents the caloric wealth driving the entire migration. And wherever the wildebeest go, the predators follow. The Mara's lion prides position themselves in the path of the migration routes with a geographical awareness that suggests significant individual experience, and possibly, cultural transmission of route knowledge between generations. The Mara's crocodiles, Nile crocodiles of impressive size, old individuals that have occupied their territories for decades, congregate at the crossing points where the migration must ford the Mara River, and what occurs at these crossings is among the most dramatic predator-prey interactions in the natural world. The wildebeest's approach to a river crossing is governed by a decision-making process at the group level that has fascinated researchers and baffled observers in equal measure. The herds gather at the river's edge in enormous, restless masses, thousands of animals pressing forward, then retreating, then pressing forward again, responding to invisible social pressures within the group. The hesitation can last for hours, individual animals approaching the edge, peering at the water then shying back, while the crocodiles wait in the shallows with the absolute patience of their kind. And then, triggered by something, perhaps a single animal's accidental commitment to the water, perhaps a sudden change in the pressure dynamics within the crowd, the crossing begins, and thousands of wildebeest pour into the river simultaneously. In the maelstrom of a major crossing, with thousands of animals churning the water to brown foam, crocodiles strike from multiple directions with explosive speed. A crocodile's attack at a crossing is a different event from its ambush of a single drinking animal. Here, the chaos of thousands of bodies provides cover and opportunity simultaneously, and a large crocodile may make multiple strike attempts within a single crossing event. The crocodile seizes a wildebeest by whatever presents itself, a leg, a flank, the neck, and uses its body weight and the power of its tail to drag the animal into deeper water. Many wildebeest escape crocodile attacks by virtue of the sheer number of animals in the water, A crocodile that successfully seizes one animal cannot simultaneously threaten the hundreds flowing past it. But those that are taken with a finality that the Nile crocodile's ancient physiology executes without hesitation. The wildebeest that cross successfully emerge on the far bank in a state of what appears to be relieved chaos, running, bucking, shaking water from their coats, before gradually settling to the grazing that was the entire point of the exercise. But the crossing exacts another toll beyond the crocodile predation. Animals are trampled in the press of the crossing. Some, particularly young calves, lose contact with their mothers in the confusion and emerge on the wrong bank, or emerge at points where the bank is too steep for them to climb out, and drown. The cumulative mortality of a migration season, from predation, from drowning, from exhaustion, from disease, can run to tens of thousands of animals, a number that seems catastrophic until it is placed in the context of the population's extraordinary reproductive rate. The wildebeest's synchronous calving strategy, producing a wave of calves so massive that predators cannot consume more than a fraction before the calves have grown large enough to run with the herd, keeps the population viable against these losses. The Cape buffalo, Cincerus cafer, is one of the most underappreciated animals on the Kenyan savanna, overshadowed in most popular accounts by the more charismatic predators, yet playing an ecological role of fundamental importance and possessing a personality and social complexity that rewards sustained attention. The savanna buffalo, unlike its forest cousin that we encountered in the Congo, can reach massive proportions, bulls exceeding 700 kilograms, with the characteristic massive horn boss that fuses the bases of the horns into a solid shield of bone across the skull in mature males. This structure is not merely decorative, it is a genuine piece of biological armor, evolved specifically in the context of the ritualized fighting between bulls that determines breeding access within the herd. Buffalo herds in the Masai Mara can number in the thousands, vast dark masses of moving bodies that raise considerable dust, and whose combined olfactory output signals their presence from remarkable distances, an involuntary advertisement that both predators and the buffalo themselves are aware of. Within the herd, the social organization is complex, with adult males occupying a hierarchy that is maintained through regular low-intensity interactions, horning the ground, presenting horn displays, occasionally engaging in the pushing contests that determine relative rank. Old bulls, past their reproductive prime, frequently leave the main herd to form small bachelor groups of 3 to 10 individuals that range widely and are sometimes encountered in areas the main herds avoid. The relationship between Cape buffalo and lions is one of the most fascinating and dangerous on the savanna. Buffalo are fully capable of killing lions. There are numerous documented cases of buffalo mortally wounding and killing lions during hunts gone wrong, and the statistics of lion mortality in areas with high buffalo densities show a significant contribution from buffalo-related injuries. A cornered buffalo or a buffalo defending a fallen herd member will fight with ferocious effectiveness, the great head swinging with its horn mass capable of driving a horn tip deep into even the most substantial predator. Lions hunting buffalo are acutely aware of this danger and exhibit behavior that suggests genuine assessment of risk, favoring ambush and coordinated approaches that minimize the buffalo's opportunity to mount an effective defense. Yet lions continue to hunt buffalo, and for prides in the Masai Mara, buffalo represent a significant component of the prey base, particularly during the dry season when smaller prey is less abundant. A successful buffalo kill provides the kind of massive caloric windfall that can sustain a large pride for several days, justifying the risk involved in taking such formidable prey. The coordinated takedown of a large bull buffalo, several lions working together to drag the animal down, with the bull fighting until the very moment of incapacitation, is one of the most physically intense events that the savanna stages, a collision of enormous biological forces that leaves no observer unmoved. In the high grass and along the river courses of the Masai Mara, moving with a measured, unhurried authority that seems to belong to a different time scale than the frantic activity of predator and prey around them, the African elephant, Loxodonta africana, conducts its affairs with a dignity and intelligence that have made it, perhaps more than any other animal, the defining symbol of what Africa's wildlife represents and what is at stake in its preservation. The African savanna elephant is the largest land animal on Earth, with large bulls reaching heights of 4 meters at the shoulder and weights exceeding 6,000 kilograms. They are creatures whose physical scale seems to belong to the Pleistocene, to the age of mammoths and giant ground sloths, yet they move through their landscape with a grace and deliberation that belies their enormous mass. The elephant's intelligence has been the subject of serious scientific investigation for decades, and the results of this research have consistently exceeded even generous prior expectations. Elephants have demonstrated self-recognition in mirrors, a capability shared among vertebrates only by great apes, dolphins, and elephants themselves, and generally considered an indicator of a degree of self-awareness. They demonstrate empathy toward other elephants, responding to the distress of injured or dying group members with behaviors that include touching, standing guard over, and apparently attempting to assist. They mourn their dead, returning to the bones of deceased family members and investigating them with apparent recognition and what observers consistently describe as grief-like behavior. They remember the locations of water sources, mineral deposits, and seasonal food resources across home ranges that may span hundreds of kilometers, and this geographical knowledge, accumulated over decades of individual experience and apparently transmitted between generations, has been demonstrated to be crucial for the survival of herds during drought years. Elephant social structure is built around the matriarchal family group, a unit of related females, led by the oldest and most experienced female, whose knowledge of the landscape, of seasonal resource distribution, and of the social geography of the elephant community represents an irreplaceable library of accumulated wisdom. The matriarch's value to her family group goes far beyond simple physical leadership. Research has shown that family groups led by older matriarchs demonstrate better foraging success in difficult conditions, better ability to avoid human-related dangers, and higher reproductive success than groups led by younger, less experienced females. When a matriarch dies, whether from natural causes, from injury, or from poaching, the loss to her family group is qualitative as well as quantitative, removing from the group a body of knowledge that cannot be reconstructed from the remaining members' experiences alone. Bull elephants follow a very different social trajectory. After separation from the natal family group in early adulthood, bulls join loose associations of other males and spend their adult lives in a fluid social world that oscillates between periods of solitary ranging and periods of social engagement with other males. As they age, bulls enter periodic states of must, a hormonal condition characterized by elevated testosterone levels, increased aggression, and the secretion of a dark, temporine liquid from glands on the side of the face. A bull in must is at peak breeding condition and will travel long distances to locate estrus females, engaging in confrontations with other males, including other musk bulls, with a ferocity that can be fatal. The largest, oldest bulls in must are treated with considerable respect by females, who actively choose to mate with them, a preference that selects for the long-lived, experienced genetics that musk bulls represent. The ecological impact of elephants on the savanna landscape is profound and multidimensional. Elephants are megaherbivores, animals so large that their feeding and movement behaviors shape the physical structure of the ecosystem in ways that smaller animals cannot. A single elephant requires up to 300 kilograms of vegetation per day, and a herd of several dozen elephants moving through an area consumes, damages, and transforms the vegetation with an intensity that amounts to a form of active landscape management. Trees are pushed over, their roots and bark consumed, and their fallen trunks opening up gaps in the woodland that allow grasses to colonize. Waterholes are deepened and expanded by elephants digging with their tusks and feet, creating water sources that benefit dozens of other species. Dung, produced in prodigious quantities by animals consuming so much plant material, is a critical nutrient source for dung beetles, which in turn aerate the soil and bury seeds, and for dozens of other insects, birds, and small mammals that depend on it. The elephant's role as a keystone species is, if anything, more clearly demonstrated by what happens when elephant populations are removed from an area. Studies from regions where elephants have been eliminated show dramatic increases in dense woodland cover, a reduction in grassland area, and cascading changes in the animal communities associated with both habitat types. The savanna without elephants is a different ecosystem, one that supports a different, and generally less diverse community of species, a testament to the central organizing role that these enormous animals play in maintaining the habitat structure that the rest of the community depends upon. Moving from the dry land to the margins of the Mara River and the oxbow lakes that fringe it, we encounter an animal that seems to embody a productive contradiction, a massive, lumbering creature that spends most of its life in water, yet whose impact on the terrestrial savanna is profound and essential. The hippopotamus, Hippopotamus amphibius, is the third largest land animal on Earth after the elephant and the rhinoceros, with large bulls weighing up to 3,000 kilograms and reaching lengths of 5 meters. They are unmistakably ancient-looking animals, with their barrel bodies, enormous mouths, and skin that seems to hang slightly loose, as if it were designed for a larger creature still. And indeed, the hippo's closest living relatives are the cetaceans, whales and dolphins, the two lineages having diverged from a common ancestor approximately 55 million years ago, a family relationship that seems improbable until you observe the hippo in water, moving through its aquatic environment with a grace and efficiency that seems disproportionate to its terrestrial awkwardness. Hippos spend the hottest hours of the day in water, submerging to avoid the savanna sun and to regulate their body temperature, as they have no functional sweat glands. Their skin secretes a pink-tinged liquid, sometimes called blood sweat, though it is neither blood nor sweat, that functions as both a sunscreen and an antimicrobial agent, protecting the hippo's skin from UV damage and infection in ways that have attracted considerable scientific interest. At night, hippos emerge from the water to graze, sometimes traveling several kilometers from their water refuges to reach productive grazing areas, consuming as much as 40 kilograms of grass per night. This dual existence, aquatic by day, terrestrial by night, connects the river ecosystem to the savanna ecosystem in a way that has significant consequences for both. The connection runs through the hippo's extraordinary contribution to the river's nutrient budget. Hippos grazing on land at night collect nutrients from the savanna ecosystem and transport them back to the river when they return to the water at dawn, where their dung, released directly into the water in the wallowing process, provides a massive input of organic matter and nutrients that drives the productivity of the river ecosystem. The aquatic food web of the Mara River, from the algae and aquatic plants up through the fish to the crocodiles and the fish eagles, is substantially subsidized by the hippo's nutrient transport service, creating a biological link between the terrestrial savanna and the aquatic river system that is invisible to casual observation but ecologically fundamental. The hippo's social life is organized around pools and river stretches that are defended by dominant bulls. A dominant bull may hold a stretch of water containing numerous females, subadult males, and youngsters, and his ownership of this water territory is maintained through displays of impressive and occasionally alarming aggression. Hippos open their mouths to extraordinary gapes. The jaw can open to nearly 180 degrees, displaying their enormous canine tusks, which in large bulls can exceed 50 centimeters in length. These tusks are lethal weapons, and fights between bulls are among the most violent and injury-prone interactions in the mammal world, with contestants inflicting gaping wounds on each other's flanks, necks, and heads. Hippo-related fatalities among human beings in Africa are significant. These animals, despite their apparently placid demeanor when at rest in water, are highly aggressive when their territory or escape route to water is threatened, and their enormous mass and jaw power make them genuinely dangerous. Yet among hippos themselves, the moments of social peace are as striking as the moments of violence. Females with calves show strong affiliative behaviors, clustering together in the deeper water and apparently cooperating in the supervision of young animals. Calves are born in water or on land and can swim almost immediately, nursing both on land and underwater. The calves are objects of considerable interest to other group members, particularly younger females who have not yet given birth, and the tolerance of these curious approaches by mothers, while remaining alert to any sign of genuine threat, suggests a social environment considerably more nuanced than the aggressive confrontations between bulls might imply. The Mara River itself, that dark, muscular watercourse whose banks support some of the most extraordinary wildlife viewing in the world, is a microcosm of the savanna ecosystem's fundamental dynamic, the flow of energy from sun to grass to herbivore to predator to decomposer and back to the soil and the grass again, the eternal circuit of life building from death and death enabling life. Along its banks, fig trees drop their fruit into the water, feeding fish that feed crocodiles. Monitor lizards, those sleek, scaled opportunists, patrol the banks for eggs, carrion, and small vertebrates. Pied and giant kingfishers work the shallows with a patient precision that would do credit to any fishing technique. African fish eagles announce their presence with that haunting, laughing cry that has become synonymous with the idea of wild Africa, a sound so evocative, so perfectly matched to the landscape it inhabits, that it seems to have been composed rather than evolved. The skies above the Masai Mara are home to their own ecological community of remarkable richness. The savanna, with its open terrain and abundant large mammals, supports one of the highest concentrations and greatest diversities of vultures anywhere in the world, and these birds perform an ecological service of incalculable value. 6 species of vulture occur regularly in the Mara: the Ruppell's griffin, the African white-backed, the hooded, the lappet-faced, the white-headed, and the Egyptian, and together they form a scavenging guild that is organized around differences in beak structure, body size, and feeding behavior that allow them to exploit different components of a single carcass without direct competition. A carcass in the Masai Mara is rarely alone for long. The first vultures to locate it do so from high-soaring flight, covering enormous areas of savanna in their search and detecting carcasses from distances of kilometers. As the first bird descends, others see it and follow, and within minutes of a predator abandoning its kill, the sky is full of descending vultures and the ground around the carcass is a heaving mass of feeding birds. The different species peel away the layers of the carcass according to their anatomical equipment, the smaller hooded vultures and Egyptian vultures working around the edges on scraps too small for larger species, the white-backed vultures plunging their naked heads deep into the body cavity to reach the soft tissue, the lappet-faced vultures with their massive beaks tearing away hide and sinew that no other bird can process. Within an hour, what was a large carcass has been reduced to a skeleton that the hyenas will crack, the bone-eaters will argue over, and the beetles and flies will eventually reduce to nothing. The efficiency of this scavenging system is extraordinary. Without vultures, the Masai Mara's landscape would be littered with carcasses that provide breeding grounds for disease and that would take weeks rather than hours to be recycled back into the ecosystem. The connection between the Masai Mara and the Serengeti, those two names that have become synonymous with wild Africa, is not merely geographic but ecological and evolutionary, the same community of species moving between them in response to the same seasonal pressures, the same population of wildebeest completing the same annual circuit, the same lions and cheetahs and hyenas operating according to the same ecological logic on both sides of an international boundary that is entirely invisible to the wildlife it was drawn across. The Serengeti Mara ecosystem functions as a single unit, and understanding one part of it requires understanding the whole. The Serengeti's short grass plains, during the calving season from February to March, present a scene of overwhelming abundance and simultaneous vulnerability. The wildebeest calves arrive in their hundreds of thousands, spindly-legged and still damp from birth, and within minutes of delivery they are attempting to stand and walk, an urgency driven by the simple fact that a wildebeest that cannot run within a few hours of birth is a wildebeest that will not survive. The calves imprinting on their mothers occurs rapidly, and the mother-calf bond is maintained through sound and smell in the chaos of the vast herd. But in those first hours, the predators are present in overwhelming numbers, drawn by the concentration of vulnerable prey, and the toll on the calves is heavy. Cheetah mothers with cubs of their own use the calving season intensively, the concentration of small, vulnerable wildebeest calves providing relatively easy prey that can be taken without the full sprint required to catch an adult. A cheetah mother in the Serengeti during calving season may make multiple kills per day, a frequency impossible at other times of year, and this seasonal surplus is critical for raising cubs through the most nutritionally demanding phase of their development. Lion prides similarly exploit the seasonal concentration of calves, and the convergence of so many predators on the calving areas creates a period of intense ecological drama that has few equivalents in the natural world. Yet the wildebeest population absorbs these losses with a resilience that speaks to the extraordinary productivity of the system. The short grass plains of the Serengeti are among the most nutrient-rich grasslands on Earth, the grasses growing on volcanic ash soils derived from ancient eruptions of the Ngorongoro volcanic complex. These soils are exceptionally rich in calcium and phosphorus, minerals critical for bone development and milk production, and the wildebeest have evolved to time their calving season to coincide precisely with the peak availability of these nutritious short grasses, giving their calves the best possible start in terms of the nutritional quality of their mother's milk. The calf mortality that seems so dramatic is, in the context of the overall population dynamic, simply the cost of the strategy, and the strategy, clearly, works, given that the wildebeest population of the Serengeti Mara has grown from approximately 250,000 individuals in the 1960s to over 1.5 million today. The grasslands themselves are not passive substrates for this drama but active participants in it. The grasses of the savanna have co-evolved with the large grazing mammals over millions of years, and the relationship is one of genuine mutualism. The grasses benefit from being grazed in ways that seem counterintuitive but reflect deep evolutionary logic. Grazing removes the accumulated dead material that would otherwise shade out new growth, stimulates the production of fresh shoots from the base of the grass plant, and distributes seeds across the landscape through the movement and dung of the grazers. The grazers benefit from the nutritious, continuously regenerating growth that results from this stimulation. Remove the grazers, and the grassland accumulates dead material, becomes a fire risk, and gradually gives way to encroaching woody vegetation. Remove the grass, and the grazers disappear, along with the entire predator community that depends on them. The relationship is ancient, mutually dependent, and currently thriving in the Masai Mara Serengeti system in ways that make it a global model for what functional grassland ecosystem looks like. The daily rhythm of the savanna follows the arc of the sun with a fidelity that is itself a form of ecological adaptation. At dawn, the lions that have been active through the night make their way to shade as the temperature begins to rise, draping their tawny bodies over rocks, under trees, across termite mounds, looking boneless and debauched after a night of hunting and feeding. The cheetahs are already on their termite mounds, scanning the warming plains with those efficient eyes. The hyenas that have been arguing over a carcass through the night gradually disperse to their communal den areas as the clan's nocturnal members return and the diurnal members begin to stir. The wildebeest herds, having grazed through the cooler pre-dawn hours, begin to consolidate and move toward water. Mid-morning on the savanna in the dry season brings a particular quality of light, clear, golden, not yet dominated by the heat haze that will blur the distant horizons by noon, that seems to compress everything into exceptional visibility and detail. The grasses, golden and dry in the clear air, move in patterns dictated by a light, warm wind. Zebra graze in their characteristic mixed herds with wildebeest, the relationship between these two species one of the savanna's most elegant examples of interspecific cooperation. Zebra, with their preference for taller, coarser grass and their broad teeth capable of processing this material, feed first, opening up the grass sward and making the shorter, more nutritious grass available to the wildebeest that follow. The two species' combined vigilance for predators is greater than either's alone, and their different strengths. The zebra's pattern-based camouflage confusing at close range, the wildebeest's greater speed over distance, complement each other in ways that reduce the predation risk for both. By mid-afternoon, the heat has reached its peak, and the savanna seems to press itself flat under the weight of the sun. The lions are profoundly asleep, panting in the shade. The wildebeest stand in clusters facing into what little wind there is, their constant tail swishing creating a visible shimmer across the surface of the herd. The elephants congregate near water, spraying themselves and each other, their ears fanning constantly to increase heat dissipation through the network of blood vessels in the large ear surface. Even the insects seem subdued, the midday quiet of the savanna broken only by the distant calling of a hornbill and the mechanical scrabbling of dung beetles working the scattered dung of the morning's grazers. Then, as the sun descends from its zenith and the quality of the light shifts from blaze to gold to amber, the savanna wakes again. The lions raise their heads, yawn cavernously, exchange greetings of head-rubbing and cheek-pressing, and begin to move. The cheetah on its termite mound shifts its position, raises itself to full alertness, its gaze sweeping the plains with renewed purpose. The hyenas at the den begin to emerge, sniffing the air, greeting each other with the complex ceremonies of rank recognition that cement the clan's social structure. It is the hour of transition, the hour when the savanna moves from its afternoon pause to the evening's intensity, and everything that happens in the next few hours, the hunts, the kills, the confrontations, the thousands of small decisions made by thousands of individual animals about where to move, what to eat, when to drink, will collectively constitute the next chapter in a story that has been playing out on this landscape for millions of years. The conservation context of the Kenyan savanna is, like that of the Congo Basin, a story of extraordinary value under genuine pressure. The Masai Mara and the Serengeti are among the most intensively studied and carefully managed wildlife areas in the world, and the wildlife populations they support are, in many respects, in better condition than might be expected given the scale of the human pressures surrounding them. The Great Migration continues, the predator communities remain intact and functional, and the grassland ecosystem produces its annual spectacle of life in quantities that still astonish even those who have witnessed it many times. But the pressures are real and they are growing. The boundaries of the protected areas are under increasing pressure from agricultural expansion, as growing human populations require more land for farming and livestock. The wildlife corridors that allow animals to move between protected areas and that were once maintained by traditional land use patterns are being fragmented, and in some cases blocked entirely by fencing, cultivation, and settlement. Drought years, which are a normal part of the savanna's climatic variability and which the ecosystem species are adapted to manage, are becoming more frequent and more severe as a result of shifts in the regional climate, placing added stress on populations that are already managing significant anthropogenic pressures. The relationship between the savanna's wildlife and the human communities, particularly the Masai people, whose traditional pastoral lifestyle has coexisted with the savanna's wildlife for centuries, is one of the most complex and important elements of the conservation landscape. Traditional Masai pastoralism, moving herds of cattle, sheep, and goats across the landscape in patterns that track seasonal resource availability, was broadly compatible with the needs of wildlife, and the Maasai's traditional values placed significant cultural importance on the wildlife and landscapes of their homeland. But the pressures of economic change, population growth, and land tenure formalization have altered these traditional patterns in ways that are not always compatible with wildlife conservation, and finding approaches that genuinely serve the interests of Maasai communities while also maintaining the ecological integrity of the wildlife ecosystem is one of the central challenges of savanna conservation. The African lion population, which numbered perhaps 200,000 individuals 50 years ago, has declined to somewhere between 20 and 25,000 today, a collapse of nearly 90% that represents one of the most dramatic population reductions of any large predator in recorded history. The causes are multiple and interacting: habitat loss, decline of prey base, direct conflict with livestock herders, and, historically, trophy hunting. The lions of the Masai Mara exist in one of the most important remaining strongholds of the species, and the population here is monitored with considerable scientific rigor. But even in the Mara, the lions face pressure, from the expanding human population on the reserve's boundaries, from conflict when lions take livestock, and from the complex social dynamics within the lion community itself, which is always managing the tension between the demands of territory maintenance and the realities of a landscape that has human activities on every boundary. The cheetah, even more vulnerable than the lion to habitat loss because of its need for large, open areas free from the high densities of lions and hyenas that would otherwise suppress it, has declined even more dramatically in percentage terms, and the subspecific population of East African cheetahs, those lean, spotted sprinters that make the Mara Plains their home, is one of the most important remaining population units of this globally threatened species. Research programs tracking individual cheetahs by identification of their unique spot patterns have accumulated decades of data on survival rates, reproductive success, and the specific pressures that affect individual animals, providing a foundation for management decisions that could not be made without this level of individual-based knowledge. The spotted hyena, while less immediately threatened than the lion or cheetah, faces its own set of challenges, particularly in areas where it comes into conflict with livestock herders. Hyenas that develop the habit of targeting livestock can trigger retaliatory killing that eliminates entire clan members, and the complex social structure of hyena clans means that the loss of key individuals, particularly dominant females whose rank position organizes the clan's entire social system, can have disproportionate effects on clan survival and reproduction. Understanding the hyena's genuine ecological value, as a predator, as a scavenger of remarkable efficiency, as an organizer of the prey community through its competitive interactions with other predators, is essential for building the public support that effective conservation requires. The African elephant, whose importance to the savanna ecosystem we have already described, faces pressures that threaten not just its numerical abundance but its social structure in ways that have profound consequences for the ecosystem services it provides. Poaching, which surged dramatically in the first 2 decades of this century before intensive anti-poaching efforts began to have effect, has in many areas preferentially removed the largest, oldest individuals, the bulls with the greatest tusk mass and the matriarchs whose accumulated knowledge is so valuable to their family groups. The result is elephant populations that are numerically present but socially and experientially impoverished. Herds without the experienced elders whose knowledge guided them through drought years and whose social authority maintained the group's cohesion and functional effectiveness. Rebuilding the age structure of elephant populations is a conservation challenge that will require decades of protected space and management, even where the immediate poaching threat has been reduced. The wildebeest migration, that spectacular annual movement of over 1 million animals, is among the most significant remaining mass animal movements on Earth, and its continuity cannot be taken for granted. The migration depends on the maintenance of the full ecosystem across which it ranges, including the wildlife corridors that allow animals to move between the Serengeti and the Mara, and the integrity of both the southern calving grounds and the northern dry-season grazing areas. Any significant disruption to either end of this circuit, or to the corridors connecting them, risks interrupting the migration in ways that could cause cascading population effects throughout the system. The migration is not simply a spectacle, it is the mechanism by which the ecosystem distributes energy, nutrients, and ecological function across a vast landscape, and its disruption would impoverish the entire system in ways that would affect every species from the lions that follow the herds to the grasses that grow in their wake. The Kenyan savanna, viewed from above on a clear morning, is a mosaic of golden grass, dark woodland patches, glinting water, and the moving dots of animals that populate every part of the visible landscape. It is a view that makes the heart expand and the mind race with the scale and complexity of what is happening in every part of that visible terrain simultaneously. In one corner of the mosaic, a cheetah is completing the stalk of a gazelle. In another, a pride of lions is regrouping after a night's hunting. Along the river, crocodiles are warming themselves on the banks while a herd of wildebeest gathers nervously at the crossing point. In the woodlands, elephants are moving through the trees with their characteristic silent-seeming footfalls, the babies staying close to their mothers while the matriarch leads them toward a remembered water source. On a termite mound, a secretary bird systematically stamps its prey into immobility with those remarkable long legs, a behavior that seems almost too specialized to be real yet is one of the savanna's most elegantly specific adaptations. This is the savanna at its fullest expression, not the savanna of any single dramatic moment, but the savanna as a system, humming with the complex energy of 10,000 simultaneous interactions, each one a negotiation between organism and environment, between predator and prey, between competitor and competitor, between the living present and the evolutionary past that shaped every behavior, every anatomy, every strategy on display. The savanna does not perform for observers. It does not organize its drama for the convenience of documentaries or the schedules of those who have traveled to see it. It simply continues, as it has continued for millions of years, enacting the processes that have made it one of the most productive and diverse terrestrial ecosystems on the planet. The night on the Kenyan savanna brings a transformation as dramatic as any the Congo offers, though of an entirely different character. The setting of the sun does not close the savanna but opens it to a different community of actors, a different set of dramas, a different register of sound and sensation. The lions that rested through the afternoon heat are fully awake and purposeful, moving through the dark grassland with a confidence born of their nocturnal visual advantage over most prey species. The leopard, present in the savanna as well as the Congo, though here hunting from the woodland edges rather than the deep forest, begins its night patrol through the acacia woodlands along the river. The hyena clans, with their extraordinary nocturnal vocal activity, fill the night with whoops and giggles and the various territorial proclamations of their complex community life. Above the open savanna, the night sky offers another order of spectacle entirely. Far from any significant sources of artificial light, the Masai Mara's night sky is a revelation, the Milky Way arching overhead in its full, unadulterated splendor, so bright that it casts a shadow on a clear night, the individual stars so numerous that finding constellations requires active effort rather than being self-evident. Meteor showers pass over the grazing herds without the animals' knowledge or concern. The moon, when it is full, floods the savanna with a silver light that changes the landscape's apparent texture without changing its fundamental spatial organization, and in moonlight, the predators that have good nocturnal vision gain a further advantage while the prey species, adapted to maintaining vigilance under all conditions, continue their interminable scanning of the horizon. The African savanna, like the Congo Basin, is a system in which the concept of conservation takes on its deepest possible meaning. To conserve this ecosystem is not to preserve a static picture. These landscapes have never been static, never been fixed in any particular configuration, but have always been dynamic, always changing in response to climate, to rainfall, to the movements of the great herds, to the evolution of new species and the extinction of old ones. To conserve the savanna is to protect the conditions under which its characteristic processes can continue: the grazing, the predation, the seasonal movements, the fire cycles that renew the grassland, the flooding that renews the riverside forests, the migrations that distribute nutrients and energy across the landscape. It is to maintain the ecological stage on which the drama can continue to play out, even as the specific actors may shift over time. The story of the Masai Mara and the Serengeti is, ultimately, the story of what the world can look like when large wild animals are given sufficient space and security to do what they have evolved to do. It is a demonstration, conducted at a scale that commands genuine awe, of what ecological complexity means in practice, of what happens when evolution is given time and space to work without interruption. The lions hunting wildebeest are not simply predator and prey. They are the latest expression of a relationship that has been co-evolving for millions of years, each species shaping the other's evolution, the prey becoming faster and more alert, while the predator becomes more coordinated and more strategically sophisticated, both driven to their respective excellences by the relentless pressure of their interaction. As the sun rises over the Masai Mara on another morning, as it has risen 10 million times over a landscape that has always supported some version of this community of life, the savanna assembles itself for another day. The lions stretch and rearrange themselves in the shade. The wildebeests begin to move. The cheetah takes its position on the termite mound. The elephants emerge from the woodland where they spent the night, the babies running to keep up with the adults' long strides. The hippos sink deeper into the cooling water. The crocodiles angle their bodies toward the first rays of sun. And everywhere, in every cubic meter of air and soil and water that constitutes this extraordinary place, the processes of life proceed: eating, being eaten, competing, cooperating, reproducing, dying, and through all of it, continuously, relentlessly, spectacularly, continuing. Africa holds these two great ecosystems, the Congo and the savanna, in a continental embrace of breathtaking generosity. Together, they represent something that the planet cannot afford to lose, evidence of what biological complexity looks like at its fullest expression, living proof that the processes of evolution, given sufficient time and space, produce results of such staggering richness and intricacy that no human imagination, no human art, no human technology comes remotely close to replicating them. The dripping green cathedral of the Congo, with its leopards and gorillas and ancient crocodiles, and the sunblazed golden plains of the Masai Mara, with their lions and cheetahs and million-strong migrating herds, these places are not separate from us. They are expressions of the same evolutionary process that produced us, members of the same community of life that we belong to, custodians of a legacy that was ancient before the first human foot touched African soil. The challenge of our time, with respect to these places and the extraordinary lives they contain, is not primarily a scientific challenge, though science is indispensable to meeting it. It is a challenge of values, of priorities, of the willingness to recognize that the world we share with these animals is richer and more complex and more beautiful than any world we could create in their absence, and to act on that recognition with the sustained commitment and the practical intelligence that the situation demands. The leopard does not need us to admire it, and the gorilla does not need our appreciation, and the wildebeest does not care whether we find its migration spectacular. These animals are complete in themselves, existing by their own ecological logic, following their own evolutionary imperatives, conducting the ancient business of survival with or without an audience. But we need them. We need the Congo's forests to regulate the climate, and the water cycle and the carbon budget of a planet that we depend on for our own survival. We need the savanna's grasslands to demonstrate to us what ecological function looks like at full expression, to provide the scientific knowledge that informs our understanding of all ecosystems everywhere. We need the gorilla and the cheetah and the wildebeest as reminders, vivid, urgent, irreplaceable reminders, that the story of life on this planet is vastly larger than the story of any single species, and that our own chapter in that story is enriched beyond measure by the chapters of every other species with which we share it. The Congo breathes. The savanna shimmers. The migration moves. The predators hunt. The great cycles of energy and matter and life continue their ancient work, as they have continued through ice ages and warming periods, through upheavals geological and biological, through every challenge that 3.5 billion years of life on Earth has presented. These systems are resilient, in ways that matter enormously. But they are not invulnerable, and the pressures of the present moment are of a magnitude and a character different from anything these ecosystems have previously faced. The gorilla family in their forest nest, the lion pride in the shade of the acacia, the crocodile in the dark river, the cheetah on its termite mound watching the golden plains, all of them are, in this moment, going about the business of their lives with complete absorption and without any awareness of the broader context in which their lives are embedded. It falls to us, to the species that is both the primary cause of the pressures they face and the only species capable of understanding and responding to those pressures, to hold that broader context in mind. To understand what these places are, what they represent, and what it would mean to lose them. To understand, in the fullest and most complete sense of that word, what Africa's great wild places are telling us about the nature of life on Earth. The Congo jungle has given us its secrets reluctantly, in glimpses and camera trap images and tracks in the mud and calls heard through vegetation so dense that the calling animal is invisible. The Kenyan savanna has given us its story in panoramic display, under open skies, in a light so clear and so generous that every detail is visible from horizon to horizon. Two ecosystems, two ways of being wild, two expressions of the same fundamental process of evolutionary elaboration over vast spans of time. Together they constitute something that is among the most precious things on the surface of the earth, proof that life, given time and space enough, achieves a complexity and a beauty that is genuinely, functionally, and aesthetically beyond anything that any human mind or human hand has ever produced. That proof deserves our understanding. It deserves our respect. It deserves, in the fullest and most consequential sense of the word, our protection. Not as a gift to these ecosystems, which require nothing from us except the space to continue existing, but as a recognition of our own place in the community of life, as one species among millions, sharing a planet whose health is indivisible, whose future belongs not to any single species but to all of them, moving together through the ancient, ongoing, extraordinary story of life on Earth. The sun sets over the Masai Mara. The last light turns the sky to bands of orange and crimson and deep purple above the flat horizon, and in that light the acacia trees are silhouetted like brushstrokes, and below them the figures of elephants move slowly toward the river, and the sky above the distant woodlands brightens briefly with the gathering of 1,000 starlings turning in perfect coordination, and somewhere in the growing darkness a lion roars, that great, rolling, ground-vibrating declaration of presence and power. And the savanna answers with the 1,000 other voices of its nighttime community, and the ancient, irreplaceable, magnificent story continues.